Hello.
Yo.
All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and kick us off here. I'm Teddy Pins, and it is April 15th for those of you watching in the future. Today we have the incredible Steve Greiss and Alec Park, both from All Wired Up. I have known Steve and Alec quite a while, but Steve for going on probably 15 years. And in that time, I've worked with him a lot, and he's worked with a lot of clients regarding home automation and home theaters and outdoor lighting and all things home tech. And it certainly he has a background in audio tech and car audio and all things audio and tech. And I've just been lucky to call you friend and appreciate all your expertise and assistance with my personal projects as well as many clients. And so today I wanted to give him a chance to share with you all a little bit more around the tech arena around homes. And one of the things we've been talking about or kicking around is that he could share that story of walking into these houses and people were doing home inspections, but they're not inspecting for the tech aspect of what's really working or not working. And that's an expensive piece of the equation a lot of times as you're getting into these higher end homes and systems. And he can share with you a couple of nightmare stories, but there are things that we need to be mindful to in during the due diligence process. And I know in this competitive marketplace, we're all doing as-is inspections, but I think it's better to have consideration of at least having someone put eyes on the technology in the home so that the buyer is aware of what they could be up against or be working with when they take possession. So without further gab, here it is, Steve Greiss and Alec Park.
Thanks, Ted. Hey, how's everybody doing this morning?
Hey, good morning.
Good, thank you. Good morning.
We really appreciate the opportunity to meet with all of you and talk with all of you about this. And as Ted had mentioned, sometimes I'm not sure if I'm crazy or what it is that I've been doing this for 32 years and that I'm still sane. And of course, you can see I don't have any hair left. That's either from marriage, kids, or this job. I'm not sure which. But when Ted alluded to some crazy stories, just to kind of give you an example of where things have gone, and this is just recently. So let's just say we have a new client with a home in Governor's Club. So we all know kind of where the price points are there. The home was shown. There was an automation system in the home. The agent that was involved didn't know to really look at what was or was not included, did not write and specify in the offer what was to be included. And long story short, when the people went to closing, they found out that the entire automation system was ripped out of the house. The appraiser basically almost didn't appraise the house for the value that it was put at because of the amount of stuff that was ripped out of there. And we are now having to go in and put over $50,000 of equipment back into that house. So I kind of leave you with the thought that what we're seeing is this is starting to affect appraised values of homes because the size of some of these systems, we have homes that are, these systems are eclipsing over $250,000. So with the type of homes that we have in this area, and we're very, fortunate and unique that there's people here with these very large homes and technology where it's gone, it's becoming part of our lifestyle. So what I want to do today is just kind of give you an idea about, what home automation is, because it's something in the past, it's a buzzword we've heard about, it was talked about, and we're truly there. And I also want to kind of make sure we understand what the difference is between automation and integration, because there's some differences there. So I'm going to kind of start going through talking about some things. We'll show you some different things. And then Ted alluded to something about an inspection, something that he and I have talked about. I brought this up to him. It's probably over a year ago. And as we've gotten more into this, we really see a need for this. So I want to kind of throw it out to you guys. We're looking at some options here, and I really want some feedback from all of you and what your thoughts are, because you have different experiences with your clients every day and what you're seeing. And it's important to us to be able to make sure we can, fill those gaps, but at the same time, provide a value add that we don't have clients that are turning around and getting this sticker shock of $50,000, $70,000, or $100,000 in some of these large homes. Please, along the way, if you have questions, just interrupt, ask. Alec and I both, we want to make sure that we We are answering your questions and making you understand what it is we're trying to convey here. So when we talk about home automation, it's kind of like, what is home automation? Well, basically, it's the automation of any electronic devices in your home. So when we start looking at electronic devices, we want to look at how we can control them, and can one device trigger another device? Quick example would be, hey, if when I'm come in and I hit the button for the garage door, can it turn on the lights from my garage through another room all the way up into the kitchen, because I'm coming in with kids late at night and I want to be able to see my pathway. So that's what a triggered device, triggered event is. So there's a lot of benefits to home automation, especially with younger families and kids in these larger homes, even down to simple things like, hey, I'm coming home from work at this time every day, and I want to make sure the thermostat is setting a particular temperature and the lights are on in a certain area, maybe in the kitchen for me. Music's playing because that's what I enjoy to listen to when I come in the door. Whatever it is, we're creating a lifestyle. So that's what home automation is all about. So when we start talking about the home automation, and I mentioned about smart devices, some of you will hear, has anybody heard the word or the term IoT? Is that familiar to anybody?
Yeah, Internet
Yes.
of Things.
Yes.
Yes, correct, Ann. Internet of Things. And it's one of those buzzwords that's been out there. And really what it is they're smart devices. They're devices that can connect to the internet so that we can control them. So basically, any device that connects to the internet would be part of the IoT or smart device. They can be anything from thermostats to light bulbs to door locks, you name it. The list is endless. What a home automation is it's us taking those devices and actually automating them in a process into a single app. Now, the key there is single app. You're probably all familiar with everything like Ring doorbells, Google doorbells, Nest cameras, and there's a specific app for each one of those things that we can control. Where it becomes a challenge, when I mentioned the word about the difference between integration and automation. Integration is when a company, say like Google or Alexa or Siri, you get one of their smart homes and they say, we can control your lights, we can control your music, we can control these things, which in a sense is automating. But what the integration is, they don't own the software, the protocol, the rights, or the devices that you're connecting to. So they have to integrate, they have to find a way to make them work. The challenge we run into sometimes is when one of those manufacturers along the way changes something in their software, it breaks the chain and then it doesn't work. True home automation are companies that actually have their own devices, and because they control all that intellectual property as well as the devices, we have less issues with them. There's nobody out there, I will tell you, that has everything that you can completely automate. We still have to do some integration, but we like to minimize that, because the more we can minimize that, the fewer problems we have. You've probably all heard nightmares about different things too, where, every time I try to do this, this doesn't work. I'm sick of this. A lot of times we run into that with some of the integration things. So we are very conscientious of that with our clients. So how does automation work? Again, I mentioned it's all connectivity through the internet. Everything talks via internet protocols or locally in the house through the Wi-Fi. Could even be through other things like Bluetooth or Zigbee or Z-Wave, which are just other communication protocols from device to device, so that we can communicate and effectively make the chain of events happen that you desire. So it's pretty simple in concept. The difficulty is making sure we have the right devices connected and we have them connected the right way and communicating. So there's three different levels that automation, predominantly works on. One is monitoring. Monitoring means that you as a user can access your system and see what's going on. It could be as simple as I could see cameras. I can look at temperatures. I can actively see who's using what TV. I can see what's happening in my home. So that's pretty straightforward. The control part is where it gets a little more complicated. The control is where I can actually not only see these devices, but I get the feedback from them, and I can actively change temperatures. I can dim light bulbs. I can open doors. I can turn a fan on for someone. I can even turn a swimming pool on, whatever you want to do. And then the last piece, or the third part of it, is the automation part of it. And the automation is where I can turn around and set up, again, like I said, triggers. If you've ever been in any one of these homes where someone has a button somewhere on a keypad on the wall or from their phone, and it says party, and you hit party and it dims the lights or change different lights to different colors, turns on fans, set the temperature, might drop the blinds and turns on their favorite music channel. That's what automation is. It's a sequence of events that happen because they're completely automated. It's not just one event happening at a time that I have to interact with. It's the single touch of a button and multiple things are happening for me to set up a sequence.
And we like to do it through one app, so you're not having to scroll through all these different apps and everything. So
right, it's automation. It becomes we run into a lot of people where we go in and they've got, like I said, the cameras up or doorbells, and they're trying to control lighting and they're going in and out of different apps. Then they're trying to go into another app for music, and they actually get frustrated to a point where they're kind of like, I don't want home automation because it's too confusing. And that's when we have to explain to them, well, your home isn't automated. You have lots of apps doing specific things and you're interacting with them. It's really no different than you going and actually having to turn on this light and then go over and start the music somewhere else. You're just using an app to do it, but you are still having to interface with each one of those instead of having it in one location. So what are the components of an automation system? An automation system, if you've walked into a home where there is one, it could be as complex as a great big rack in a closet that has lots of amplifiers and network switches and things in there, to it could be in a cabinet, beside a fireplace there where there's built-ins and there's a little host or hub that's the main brains or computer, and it's talking to the network, connected up to a network switch and connected to a couple devices. So it can be a really large system or it can be a really small system. That's the beauty of where we are today with home automation. It's totally scalable. You can start with as small a system as you want to meet your needs and then grow it over a period of time. Back in the day when a lot of this started, to talk about home automation, especially with lighting, it required a rewiring of the entire house. And it would get very expensive because you'd have to, pull wires and rip apart walls and do a lot of damage to the physical structure with drywall repair and everything, that we don't have to do any of that anymore. So it's very easy to go in and retrofit a home, or from a new home, do anything that you want. When we talk about kind of the remote control portion of home automation, the hallmark part of it is actually the automation and the mobile application. The applications will run on anything from an iPhone to a iPad to a Droid. Pretty much any type of tablet or phone you have, the app is available from these manufacturers, whichever company we go with for automation, and you have complete connectivity from anywhere in the world. If you have an internet connection through cellular or whatever it is, you have access to your home and all of the features that are in it that are on the system. That's really truly the hallmark of it. And then from there, you have the ability, if you want. Some people like to use whether it's the Alexa or Siri or Google, these systems support the voice command control. So that can be added in as well, that if you want to say, hey Siri, turn on the lights in the kitchen, it'll work with the home automation system and actually go ahead and turn on your lights, which in some aspects it is a nice feature until you have lots of little kids running around and they realize what you can do. And then they're running through the house and yelling like my kids do. And they think it's great because they can have all the lights come on. So like I can say, hey, Alexa, turn on the kitchen lights, and they'll come on. But just like that, if you can see the lights came on in the background, she went ahead and turned them on for me. So it is a lot of nice features, and that's a nice feature when we come in with handfuls of groceries, I will tell you. Outside of that, the next part of this, when we start looking at it, we talked about what the communication protocols are. The communication protocols are, again, it's the Wi-Fi, the Zigbee, the Z-Wave. These are all things that are common in homes and you just don't realize it. We're already talking about putting in, a network for your home. And in that home, we're talking about wireless. So when we start looking at the wireless, components of it, all of these manufacturers for these home automation systems have systems that can be connected via Wi-Fi or hardwire connected. So as an example, I mentioned before about the lighting, how intensive it was to go in and retrofit a house. Now we simply take the switch out of the wall and put a new switch in that's a smart switch. That switch has Wi-Fi capability on it, or potentially Zigbee or Z-Wave. So it's able to communicate in your own home with these protocols. which makes it very simple for us to be able to go back and retrofit and create the, the lifestyle that you would like or your client would like in their home.
And honestly, as far as Wi-Fi goes, it's probably one of the biggest issues we find as far as being able to control everything. A lot of the clients that we deal with don't tend to understand that you need pretty good Wi-Fi coverage throughout your home to even control simple things that most people use on their apps. But I mean, it's a big issue, and it really comes down to talking to your service provider and getting you a higher speed, because the more devices you have on the Wi-Fi, the slower it's going to be. So,
right. Now that's a great point, Alec, because that's one of the things that when we do home automation, we always completely do a network assessment at the client's home. Number one, because more, as we're all seeing it, and here we all are on Zoom instead of in person. More and more people are working from home. Kids have been home, of course, with the COVID this past year. It's been very challenging. So there's more demands on the networks at the home, predominantly wireless. And when we're going to come in, and just as an example, I don't know if anybody, you kind of looked at the number of devices on your network. You sit there and think any one of you might walk in the door. And when you walk in the door at your home, potentially 3, 4, or 5 of your own devices now connect to your network. You could be walking in with 1 or 2 laptops, an iPad, an iPhone, who knows what else. All of your devices now start connecting. Kids are walking in with a computer, an iPad, and an iPhone, and that's 3 more devices. So you start having multiple devices connect. Well, if we're in a large home and we're going to do 50, 80, or 100 dimmers or switches, every one of those becomes a device on the network. So the network infrastructure becomes a big part of our assessment, and it benefits not only for the home automation system, but it benefits them in general because we make sure they have complete coverage, like Alex said, from one end of the house all the way typically out even into the garage, and a lot of times the backyard, because backyard spaces are becoming so prevalent, whether it's a swimming pool or a big patio. It's all great until you get out there and all at once I have no network connectivity. When we start talking about the different home automation systems, there's some choices out there. The biggest choice out there, I say that with a sigh because there's a number of companies out there. In my preference, I'll tell you who the companies are that are the big players that I see that are true home automation companies. And then I'll tell you, we have our preference in who we use. The big companies out there, one of them is Savant. Savant's another big California company, and they do a phenomenal job. RTI is another huge one. They've been around for a long time. Control 4 is another company. They're based out of the Carolinas. And then Crestron, another California company. Crestron is something that you may have seen in some of the big homes here. If not, definitely probably have seen Crestron in commercial buildings. And we're very prevalent in that area. Those are kind of your big players in the true automation side. And the reason I say that, they have some of the best engineers in the world working for them to write the software that's necessary to truly do the things we're talking about, as well as they develop their own systems, switches, devices, so they control that intellectual property. So we don't have a lot of these confusion and issues when, hey, when I hit this button, this doesn't work anymore. And that's because, the manufacturer they were connecting to change something. We've all seen simple little things. Just when Apple decides to change something in an update all at once, I can't print, I can't do this, I can't do that. And that's what I'm talking about. So it comes down to when you meet with a system integrator and you're looking at all this, it's deciding which system do we go with and why. The next thing we want to really decide on is what do I want to do? So we like to go room by room and kind of decide in any given room, what do you have in there? Do you want to control lights, fan, blinds? Could it be music, TVs? So we start talking about, the different devices. I mentioned before about these different communication protocols. That becomes a moot point at this point, because depending on the system you go with and the devices you want to control, that'll automatically dictate the communication protocols.
Steve?
Devices. Yes.
Sorry, may I interject?
Yes.
So I'm thinking of this class like home automation for dummies. So can I ask some really basic questions? I'm just trying to get a little bit of context, and you let me know if I'm way off base. I'm curious about whether or not these systems are proprietary. When you talk about these these four, I think you said the four big home automation companies, do they have proprietary systems, or is this a situation where you're looking at either, like Amazon, Google, Apple, and plugging and playing or trying to integrate those things? I'm just trying to get a handle on what the equipment and what the systems are that you use, or how you decide which ones you're going to use.
No, that's a great question. Yes, they are proprietary. They are companies that, like I said, develop and build their own software and the hubs and systems that talk to everything. They also build a lot of their own switches. Unlike when you mentioned Google and Amazon and Apple, they don't typically build their own light switches. They have to turn around and say, oh, okay, well, we can interface with Wemo switches or GE switches. And then they have to do it via a lot of times a Zigbee or Z-Wave protocol. And that's where we run into some of the issues in communication. Some things work, some things don't, because there's limitations to Zigbee and Z-Wave compared to full-blown internet. So it's not something that one of your clients can install themselves. It's
Right.
These systems being proprietary. We are licensed engineers with these companies where we've got extensive training and have all the software to go in, and we build the protocols. We basically build it exactly the way the client wants to have it operate, so that we try to make it as seamless as possible.
And like we said, those plug and play devices, they can talk to these smart systems we are referencing.
Correct.
Got it. You said these systems are scalable. Is it your preference to have somebody start with a small system that you install that you can add to later? Or would you rather, is it easier for you to have clients that have plug and play stuff that you just make talk to your system?
No, another really good question. We prefer to make them, to start smaller. If it's a client that's dabbling in this and wanting to do that, we prefer to start small and get them to really understand the value in one of these truly integrated automation systems where they have their own complete setup, like Savant as an example, because they're going to find out that it's a lot more seamless. They are much more app friendly in the way they work and the way they're laid out, and just don't have the hiccups and issues along the way. So what we like to do is kind of work with, what are your top priorities? We kind of lay some things out, and then look at what if they have a budget, and then we work within that to get that small system in, and then explain to them this is scalable at any time. So I'll give you a real quick example. A lot of times we'll move into a house, and one of the simplest things that I like to do is there's always somewhere in these homes where a guy wants to have his man cave. We'll put it that way, whether it's a theater or he wants surround sound and everything. And we love that. I appreciate that. Sound and video are definitely one of my fortes. And with that becomes a bit of a challenge sometimes, because we have a remote control for a TV, say, a remote control now for the receiver, if we're going to have separate speakers and everything in, potentially a remote control for maybe an Apple TV or a cable box, maybe even a Blu-ray player, but there could be multiple remotes. And it becomes one of those situations where I have all these remotes. I don't want to see the equipment, so they want the equipment hidden somewhere. So you have to now have some sort of universal or smart remote in that'll try and control things, because you don't want to be trying to figure out what button do I press for what. Savant, as an example, we could put in, and it's a one-touch button to turn on that entire theater. It could even be a projector and a drop-down screen. One button turns the whole thing on and controls it and simplifies it. That begins the starting point in a basic home automation system, because not only will the host that we would put in control that video system, it can control multiple other TVs throughout the house, audio, lighting, anything that they want. So a lot of times we'll start with one main room like that, where it's I call it the marriage saver sometimes, because it's usually the guys that can figure out the remotes and the women that want to kill them because there's too many remotes there and too many buttons to press. We'll put that in, and I'll turn around and do an outdoor lighting package with it. By that, what I mean, you got your coach lights at the garage, possibly a front porch light, maybe a back porch light, and some floodlights outside, maybe even your landscape lights. And you want those to come on at night for safety and security, and it makes the house look really nice. but you have to run around to all the different switches or worry about a timer being, working correctly for landscape lighting. We'll turn around and set that up and automate all those. So that little outdoor lighting package with that theater package is their starting point, as an example. From there, it typically will grow because they'll use it and then they'll start figuring out, oh, hey, it'd be nice if we could control this music or add music on the patio or in the bedroom or additional lighting. Does that help some?
Yeah, that's very helpful to hear that. And then my last topic, just as you go along, I don't want to take over your presentation here, but just thinking about it as we go, if you could address privacy concerns with all this stuff connected and all, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All microphones, the cameras, the everything.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So privacy concerns from, there's two levels actually. One is the fact that since we as custom integrators are putting the systems in and we're programming this, we have access to the system. We have access to the system as far as the back end and programming. I do not have access to looking in at your home, say if there were cameras and things like that, unless you granted me access because we had to work on something. So that's the first thing I like to make sure people know, is that from your own privacy, we as custom integrators want to make sure we create that barrier and we're not invading your home. That I think it's a huge thing, and it's a really great question because a lot of times we are putting cameras and things in like that. And honestly, I don't want to necessarily know what's going on around that house or being brought into it unless I have to be, or you choose to bring me in. The second part of that with security would be, I think maybe more where you were looking, is just the fact that we have a system that's automated with an app, and how secure is it for someone hacking into my system?
Yeah,
And
it's that sort of stuff. And then also just screens that have cameras in them, that microphones are on, et cetera. Like, I mean, to me, this is just generally accepted that your phone's listening, your laptop's everything's listening, right?
right, no, you're absolutely right. It's because people were kind of like, wow, I don't understand it. I just jumped on Amazon and exactly what we were talking about yesterday showed up in my feed, right?
Yeah.
Or the internet. And you're right. There's all kinds of your phone. Actually, you can go in under settings, and there's a place where your phone is tracking you. Your phone knows everywhere you've gone.
That's right.
Those are things you can turn off on your phone, and they will not affect this app at all, because this when we set this up, you have direct connection. We port through to your system. So that's the first part. If you want to turn those off for your own security, you have direct access to the system without anybody else being able to get in. The other part of it too is, I mentioned, and when Alec brought it up about the internet part we put in, the system that we put in, we're Ubiquity engineers. So Ubiquity is a commercial networking company that we put into both commercial and residential settings. And it has a very high level of security that we run on the system to protect you for everything in the house, even beyond the automation system, because we don't want anybody being able to hack into your system at all. So that protects you from that level.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. I was just thinking of a really simple example. I remember somebody installing some Honeywell thermostat somewhere, and they were explaining that Honeywell is a defense contractor, and their IP thing constantly skips like every second or something, so that nobody can ever track it. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting just for your thermostat. But rather than just being statically plugged in with an IP address, it's constantly skipping so that nobody can ever trace the IP. Anyway, I thought that was interesting.
No, correct. So what we create is a firewall within the network, and that firewall protects you for anything from outside the house when you're remotely accessing it. That people can't track it, because what we're able to do, and the IP, you have a really good story there explaining that about the IP skipping. It constantly is updating to a new IP address. What we use to solidify things is something called a MAC address. Every device has a solid MAC address that never changes. So the way they resolve that moving IP address is by that MAC address. And that's what we use to make sure that we can communicate, but at the same time, create the security level to protect you from unwanted people getting in on your network.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you addressing that. That's where I was going.
Great question. It's something we all need to be concerned about, because we live in a day and age of electronics that we have become accustomed to, and in many respects dependent on. And with that comes some risks that we need to be very cautious with, and making sure that we're protecting ourselves, because I work in this industry, and there's things that I don't necessarily like or approve of. And one of the things we constantly do is we will tell clients, I wouldn't advise that. And I do that from a standpoint of, like I said, having been in this industry for as long as I have, we like to advise our clients in the best products, but not only the best products, in the best interest of the safety of their family. We want to make sure that they are clients that they can rely on us and trust us. We kind of have a saying with All Wired Up: once you become a customer or a client of All Wired Up, you're a client for life. And that kind of stands true in many, many ways, because we have clients where we travel multiple states because they have moved, and we get the phone calls to go because they're comfortable with us, and we make sure that we are taking care of them. So it doesn't matter the size of the job or who it is, we're going to treat everybody the same way and give them that same respect. As far as, kind of jumping back into this, we're talking about, picking the devices, going room by room in, what you want to do. Then we look at the installation, and the installation can be as simple as one day. So it's kind of the system we just described, where we go in and take care of an audio video setup, maybe for one room to get them started and change out some light switches. We're in and out in a day, and it's done. All the way up to, we've got large scale homes where I've got installations that are probably taking 3, 4, 6 weeks, depending on whether it's a home that's being renovated, being built, or in a existing home. One on Belmont, it was a total retrofit of a system, and I think we took 3 weeks to redo the entire place. So it really depends on the size of the system as to how long that installation takes, but we move through it as fast as we can. Once installation is complete, then comes the training time. We sit down with the clients or anybody in the family, and we will go through and establish all their logins and do a full system training so that they understand how to use everything, and create any of the scenes or events that they want. Simple scenes are, one of my favorite here at my house is good night. I've got a button that says good night. When I hit good night, it turns off all my lights that I want turned off in the house, turns my bedroom fan on, sets the temperature in the house to where I want it, and locks my front door with the press of one button. And, we have 8 kids. Thankfully, not all 8 of them are living here, but with the ones that are living here, I can promise you, doesn't matter how old they are, they don't know how to turn off a light. And I get tired of running through the whole house, turning lights off. So I know when I hit that one button, it's time to go to bed. So that's just a simple example of a scene. We can create scenes for anything you want. I've got a good morning scene that turns on lights out here in the morning when I'm not quite awake yet, but just enough light so I can stumble out here and get my coffee and get moving. And then as time goes on, it automatically shuts off and other lights come on. It's very nice. I've become very dependent on it. I don't like to say lazy, but I guess that's what it is, because instead of me having to go around and turn a couple switches on, I know this just happens every morning at 6 a.m. and it's fantastic. This system really does tend to sell itself, because people start to see not only the simplicity in it, but they see the value in it and the benefit of making life simpler. Electronics, in many respects, I feel, have gotten to a point where they are a benefit to us, but in many respects, they've also become a hindrance, because it just kind of complicates things. So when we start talking about all the different things that are out there, I'm just going to kind of run through a litany. So we've already talked about TVs, any type of TV, audio equipment, video equipment, projection systems. We can control all that. We can control lights, dimmers, ceiling fans. Security cameras can be brought up on the system, security systems, electronic door locks, garage doors, swimming pools and spas, outdoor lighting, blinds,
Doorbells.
Yeah, doorbells. Pretty much, if you can think of it, we can control it. Gates for large estates, where the gates there. Trying to think. I'm trying to think if there's any crazy things I've been asked about controlling. Automated locks
We're seeing
on
appliances now. We're seeing ovens and coffee makers and things beyond just outside that they have.
Correct.
Internal integration stuff or automation that's starting to come online too.
Correct. And to that point, Ted, every day, there's more stuff coming on. So it's one of those things where we tell people all the time, just ask, because it might be something that we can automate. And I just don't know it yet because we haven't been asked about it before, and it's not a problem. We'll take care of it. So it's crazy the amount of stuff that we can automate, and it really does have, some great opportunities for us. So kind of looking at everything and kind of wrapping it up, I've said this before, we live in a world that's becoming more and more dependent on electronics and connectivity every day. It's part of our life. In the past, a smart home was something we only talked about, and it was pretty difficult to achieve because it became expensive and very time consuming and was very invasive to the home. With so many new devices coming on the market every day, there's truly no limit to what we can do. The technology has made automating things so much easier. We really look at this as an opportunity to make life safer and more convenient than it ever was before. With all of that, we are looking at it from a standpoint of how does this kind of play in with you. I told you the one little story about a house very recently we were getting started on. It was a week after that I got a call from another house over in Belmead, almost an identical scenario. An entire system was ripped out, and we're having to redo a whole bunch of stuff. Down to, as a different example, there was a real estate agent at another agency that called me on the front end, which was fantastic. On another large home, we went in, and the client was selling this home with all this automation that was in, and put a price tag of over $100,000 on everything, and was touting everything. And they brought us in to do a quick walkthrough because they were looking to put an offer in. And while there was a lot of stuff in there, we went through and I dated everything that it had been installed 10 or 12 years ago. A lot has changed in technology in the last 10 or 12 years. Technology changes so fast, even in 6 months, it's unbelievable. The value that they were putting on it was nowhere near what it was. And based on that, they were able to provide, accurate information and feedback to the sellers and negotiate some additional, better pricing on the house because everything had to be torn out and replaced. So that's just one example in this. So with all that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up a document here really quick, if I can share this and show you. Can everybody see that? Or those of you that are on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what Ted and I have been talking about a little bit. This is it's an AV home inspection. So Ted mentioned about how we go to the extent of going ahead and getting our homes inspected for everything from plumbing to electrical to structural, which we really definitely need to do because we don't know what gotchas there might be. We're seeing more and more where now these AV inspections might be something that are very viable and something we need to consider, especially these homes are becoming more and more complex. And in many cases, some of the builders that have been building some of them, they really don't even know what they're putting in the homes. So what we've put together here is kind of a 3-tier approach. So tier 1 would be a straight audio-visual equipment. So this could be where, they want to make sure that at every location they're going to put a TV, the proper connections are there, whether it be HDMI, coax, or hardwired network connections there, to a theater where maybe there's a projector and a screen, that everything is where it needs to be, everything is functioning properly. I don't have a 15-year-old projector in there that's going to cost me $10,000 to replace, or a screen that needs to be replaced. Speakers that could be potentially blown. We've run into this where there's speakers all through the house, and the prior owners had some major parties or something because every speaker in the house was pretty well blown, and they were going to all have to be replaced, or the amplifiers are bad. So that's what the kind of the audio-visual equipment would be. We'd go through and look at that and determine what's working, what recommendations we have, what might need to be replaced. Tier 2 would add in network and security cameras. So with the network, we're looking at making sure that there's network cables everywhere they need to be. There's adequate Wi-Fi coverage. And while this might seem funny, you don't need a huge house to have an issue with Wi-Fi these days. these shotgun homes or these tall skinnies that are being built all over, in East as well as in the nations, the 3 floors, they typically bring in the network, connection for the Wi-Fi and everything down on the first floor. Well, till you start get to the second floor, there's some issues until you get to the 3rd floor. And if they have a rooftop deck, there's next to no Wi-Fi at all. And we're constantly having to go in. And what we find out is the builders are putting these in and not running any network lines up and down through the floors. So it makes it a real challenge for us to go in and turn around and get network everywhere they need them. And of course, with more people working from home, they are having an office somewhere upstairs or a TV movie room up on the 3rd floor. And it's a real issue. So we would look at everything from that entire infrastructure and again, put a package together. And the 3rd one is a full automation. So with full automation, it would include the first 2, and then looking at these automation systems, because there's more homes around than you realize that actually have Crestron installed or Savant or Control 4 or RTI. And there could be an iPad on the wall or a tablet on the wall, and they're integrated. And what we find out is a lot of times they're older systems. We walked into one home that I guess it was 2 years ago, a very large Savant system that had a hefty price tag on it when it was installed. And it was so old, even though they were selling it as a high level system, that it's not even supported anymore. And the entire system had to be replaced. And it was well over $250,000.
And the whole system was still in the old homeowner's name and
Right.
still on his account and everything. And, it becomes a hassle trying to even get it to work because it's not on your Wi-Fi or something.
So what we were thinking is, we know not every home is going to have audio visual, needs and or the network or security. It could be one or the other. So the breakdown here is, when I look at the levels in pricing, we're calling it a bronze, silver, and gold level. A bronze level includes either tier 1 or tier 2. You could do either one, because your needs may be more on the network and security camera side. And the reason I say the cameras, we tie those in with network, is we're running into a lot of homes where there are security cameras, but they were cameras that were installed a long time ago. So they're old analog cameras that really have poor video quality on them. And all the new stuff that is put in is required to be on Cat 5 or Cat 6 network cables. And that would be tied directly into the network. So we're able to do it when we update the network. Or they might just have the audio video piece. They're not worried about the network. So with the bronze level, you could pick one of those tiers, and it'd be a $175 fee for us to come in, assess everything, and get a written report back. Silver level would include both of the first 2, and that would be at $300. And then the gold level is inclusive of everything, because it's full automation. Because most of the time when we get into these larger homes, the automation systems they're dependent upon the network and Wi-Fi. They will have cameras involved usually, and they definitely have audio and video, and that would be $500. I definitely want thoughts and feedback on this from you guys. The $500, we're kind of looking at it, and we've gone back and forth with it. It will definitely take us some time to assess everything effectively and what needs to be done. But we kind of look at it with a lot of these systems. It's a small price, because some of the people we've talked to, like I said, in most of these cases, where if they'd have paid us, if we'd have been doing this and they'd have paid us $500, they could be saving themselves $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 on the back end, maybe more. Any questions?
Steve,
Yes.
do these inspection fees include possibly teaching a new buyer how to use the system? My experience with these are that the seller actually only barely knows how their own system works. The listing agent definitely doesn't know how the system works, or only sort of. And then you have the buyer who comes in for showings or whatever, and they're like, that's interesting, but they don't really know what it all does. And
Yes.
so is that part of the inspection process? Would they come with you, or how do you envision that? Or is that an add-on?
What we envision is, most likely we would probably have to go in. So it could be done one of two ways, actually. One would be if, this is moving forward and moving fast, and you're in your, say 10-day window for inspections, we would probably try and have to get in during when all the other inspections are going in and do an assessment. So at this point, the client has already decided to move on the house and we're kind of on the back end. So we would do an assessment on what's there so they know, explained, and then we could explain to them and go over everything that's in there, what's working, what recommendations we have, and teach them about everything that's there. That's the one side. The other side of it would be if, and I actually highly recommend this based on, like I said, a couple of these situations. If you're working with a high level client in one of these large homes, you probably would benefit from calling us in on the front side before an offer is put in to look at this, because we have several of these clients where this has happened, and we're talking the smallest job on any one of these that we've had to go in and talk about fixing is $50,000, and several of them have been over $150,000. So
I agree with the idea of coming in at the start before you make an offer. Do those pricing levels still apply for that on the front end?
yes, because we would be doing a thorough inspection. The same thing. What we would do wouldn't change at all. We'd prefer to meet with you if you're the agent working with the client, and the client in the home there on the front end, and we could go through, so we could have very open conversations with you and the client about what we see, what challenges, or what's good, what's not, and then we could make a decision on what we would put together as far as if we needed to put a proposal together, so you could determine, hey, well, based on this, we want to change what our offer is going to be, because we like the home, but we know we're going to have to spend some money for this, and then move forward from there.
So logistically, and everybody else chime in here, if everybody's showing property and you need your home automation inspector to come with you, how does that work in this hurry up and make an offer or you don't get the house?
You bring up a really good point that could be a challenge. I guess the first question I'd throw back is, how many homes are you going into are at this level with, like, say, the full automation that you're running into this right now?
100%. Like it's not a major issue. I'm curious just about the logistics. If somebody is going to look at a house, and we typically have an hour window, and we might say, hey, let's look at this afternoon.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I get the fact that the world that you're living in right now with your clients is pretty crazy, and timing with that. We would do our best to accommodate that type stuff. Whether it was me, Alec, or one of the other guys, we had to come out to do the assessment. We have several guys that we can send out to do these assessments and try to accommodate your schedule as best we can, because I truly understand that timing is everything in the world that you're living in right now with clients.
And honestly, for us to step away for an hour isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I also think that, it may not be in the situations we're in. I mean, people aren't even as crazy as it is right now. They're not even getting full inspections, or they're pass fail. So it may not be that you'll be able to put it in at the time of offer. However, at least doing it as part of your inspection period, so that the buyer better understands what they're getting into. I mean, in a perfect world, or in a more balanced market, clearly we would have hopefully that time for someone to go in. And it leads to a point that I think we should be considering when we're working with our sellers as part of their disclosure, is having them put together a sort of a home automation checklist or disclosure. And that is, kind of giving them, and maybe we'll ask Steve and their team to put something together that we would submit to the sellers to ask them, do you have a home theater, or if you've seen a home theater in there, right? Like, do you have any wireless extenders? Do you have any alarm system in the property? Right now, it seems like no seller wants to deal with any of that, but I think it would be good front end work as listing agents to kind of detail what equipment is in the home, and what are we leaving or open to leaving and not, so that a buyer can better understand what they're walking into, because we still seem to see some discrepancies between sellers' belief of whether their Ring doorbell and their Nest thermostat stays or not, or especially home security that is wireless, but yet it's stuck to the wall. Is that considered an attachment?
I think too, this could go either way, as far as, like, we could be working for the seller to a point where we can value something that they're selling with the house and provide that on the front end.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we've had a couple clients that have sold their homes, and where we've done the work there, we've been able to go back and pull together everything we did and what total dollar that was spent on the house, and then, basically depreciate it to where it is and current technology, so that they had somewhat of a value for them, and figuring, because they had decided they were going to leave it. But Ted, you bring up a great point. We run into that all the time. I mean, places where they do leave the Ring doorbells and things like that, and those are tied to somebody's account. So the reality of it is, while it's part of the structure when it's screwed to the wall, that is tied to the previous owner's account, and it has to be released by them. I can't go in and even reset it. That bell or thermostat or whatever it is, it was tied to that account, and we have to get them to do a full release, which is kind of heading into a whole nother area that, I've been thinking about, that is a bit of a challenge, because so many of these companies are tying a device to an account that it has ownership, that, in many respects, we've tear it off the wall and throw it away.
And they love
Which is a
that
shame.
as the hardware providers,
Yeah.
right? They love that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like when you would buy an iPhone, you have to get it released, right, and turn certain settings off. I don't think we're all accustomed to that. And so I think that would be a place where would be major benefit, Steve and Alec, where if you could get us a list of something that we need to make sure just kind of goes as part of our transition checklist, that that they're releasing these devices, such as Ring doorbells and these alarm systems. They I'm not saying they want us to throw them away, but they love when the hardware is tied to that account, and therefore sometimes, like with warranties, right, they don't transfer, and the beneficiary is the manufacturer.
No, you're absolutely right.
There's security issues with that too. That comes up a lot, where people are like, my Nest thermostat keeps changing. And I've heard funny stories about
Right.
sellers trolling the new buyers and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you can't access it. And I don't know how to do it. Like, it would be helpful to have some kind of checklist that says, okay, this is what you need to do with your stuff before you, and confirm that it's been changed before you transfer the property.
Correct. No, you're absolutely
It's
right.
always interesting to me, like, the garage codes, you don't have to have the original code to change the code.
Right.
But sometimes people are like, well, you need to give us the codes. And many times it's their birthday, and it's also their ATM pin, and it's their security system password, and it's all the things, right? So it's like, nobody should be really keen on giving out that 4-digit code, nor necessarily do they have to. But I do know, in the sense of like Ring doorbells and certain thermostats, they have to release the hardware from their account. And, what does that look like? So it sounds like, something we can get some additional information and checklists together on that to share. I'll commit to do that with you guys and share that with you all.
Yeah,
That
I think
sounds like a contracts issue too. Like, this is just a area of our industry that needs some updating as far as our contractual stuff goes.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming more and more prevalent.
I think, and that's a really good point, because it doesn't matter whether it's due diligence that'll need to be done on both the seller and the buyer side. Somebody's got to make sure that we're looking at this. And to that point, I don't recall who it was that brought up about the Honeywell thermostats, the IP address changing. Well, the Honeywell thermostat is tied directly to the manufacturer, which means you can't, if they've set up the automation portion of it, you can control it locally, but they can turn around and mess with your thermostat all day long remotely, because it has to be released.
Well,
Ted, what do you think about this? There's something in here somewhere where, like, you and I aren't equipped to ensure that these things have been transferred. Steve, is that something you guys do, or that you can talk to, is that a service that you'd consider providing, ensuring that those things are turned off or switched over, or do you even have a say in that?
It's so to that point, when we end up contracted with a client for whatever reason, and they're going into a new home, or new to them, and there's devices like that in there, we will actively go through everything in that house. We do our due diligence, from doorbells to cameras to whatever thing, to make sure that everything has been released and turned over to the new client. And we've had some situations where the sellers fail to respond, or they won't provide the information, and then in that case, to Ted's point, manufacturer loves it, we replace it. because I do not want to leave a device in there where someone can be looking in on a camera, controlling something. It's a very precarious position to be in for everybody. So it is something that we do when we are contracted with a client for whatever we're doing. It potentially could be a whole nother service that we provide just doing that if we're not doing a whole bunch of other work there.
Right. I think it kind of would fall under tier 2, possibly 2, as far as network and security goes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those are tied to the network anyway.
Well, and to that point, part of it, if we were doing that type of assessment, those are things we would put in there to make sure that, hey, this hike vision camera system in here seems to be working, appears to be working fine. We want to make sure that you have the system's been released. We have complete access to it, any login information, so that we can go in and wipe out any users that were in there. Those would all be things that we would include in that evaluation that need to be done.
Yeah, I put in the chat, I think it's a great point, Ann, is that it does, some further work is needed here. And I do think at what point, obviously, I think the problem's only going to get worse and could hold up closing, right? It's more important than a key to the front door for most people. I mean, as long as they have plumbing and Wi-Fi, they're okay, but anything less, it's not okay. And so maybe there's something at that final walkthrough and additional coordination that's done in advance so that they understand. And I think that's where, part of why I wanted to offer this type of class is that we're looking during the walkthrough with the buyer and jotting those things down, just as routine as we are. Is the fridge, washer, dryer staying? Is right when we walk up, do you notice a Ring doorbell and I write Ring on it? Do I notice an automated thermostat? Do I notice any security cameras or exterior cameras? And writing those things down so that we can discuss if and how those are going to be left and turned over. But it's a messy spot.
It sure seems like there need to be some disclosures. And as I sit here listening to this, it seems like we have some liability here. If we don't know what these are and we're selling these houses and they're open to, you have a buyer move in and now their house is still accessible by the previous seller. I mean, that could be a little nefarious.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't seem great.
It doesn't. And it seems like the problem's only increasing quickly.
It absolutely is, because one of the other things too that you don't necessarily think about is, Ted, you brought up about the code for the garage door. Probably the number one selling garage door around the country is the Chamberlain or LiftMaster, and it has MyQ on it. And if you're familiar with MyQ, you can create an account and link your garage door directly to it through the internet, which means remotely you can open your garage door from your phone. That's a huge issue if we don't get that system off of the network and reset and everything. The other one too are the electronic door locks. So
Right.
even more so than the thermostats, someone has direct access through a Schlage or quick set door lock. So these are all definitely things that, when we are there on site, whatever we're doing, we are looking at all those things. I look at it, for me, it's a value add service, but it's for me a way to endear myself to the customer, because we want to make sure we're taking care of them. And you're right, Ann, as we continue to go on, it's become more and more prevalent with everything that's connected. So in the homes that we're doing, we are going through disconnecting stuff constantly. I just did it yesterday with a client here in the Franklin area. Went through and had to redo their entire network because a friend of a friend said they could help them with their network, redid a bunch of their stuff with their network, had complete access to their network, and absconded with over $29,000 of stuff from their accounts.
Jeez.
Yeah, it seems like, at least from a realtor point of view, that maybe we have them sign a waiver or something that says they agree to have an inspection of this stuff before they move in, or that they know that they should have it done before they move in, or something like that. Because it sure seems like it'll come back to us. If they have some issue, it'll be like, why didn't you tell me that thing was there? You're selling the house. You're supposed to know what it is. And it's getting harder and harder for us to know exactly what it is that we're selling.
That's where we come in.
That's again, another great point. I mean, because it could be, there's multiple manufacturers for doorbells, and you could be looking at it not realizing it's a video doorbell. Even the cameras.
Yeah, Ring isn't the only one. I mean, I know it's the most popular, but there's at least probably 10 to 15 of them.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one of the scariest things is, and I'm sure you've all seen it, anybody that's done with Ring, is in this past year, because Amazon owns Ring now. So Amazon's deciding to try and control the world just like Google. And they've managed to link with your Prime account your Ring doorbell. So that means an Amazon guy could have the ability to walk up and through a controller open your garage door to put your package inside. Well, that sounds like a really great idea, except guess what? Most people don't lock their door from the house to the garage.
And Amazon has actually proposed just that they be able to walk in your front door and then close it. I just saw some commercial the other day where a guy's in the shower and there's some delivery guy. I don't even remember what the product was, but it was basically like the guy's in the shower and the delivery guy opens his front door, drops whatever it was, package, pizza, who knows. And the guy in the shower thinks this is awesome because he gets to take a shower, and when he gets out, whatever's there. And I'm like, this is bananas. And
yes,
it's just the way they sold smoking. It's fine. It's all going to be fine. What could be wrong with this? Look how enjoyable this is.
Right. Yeah, you're right, Ann. And we highly advise clients against that, because again, remember, if you sell that house and that was linked and they own all that connectivity, they might have connected where a front door can be unlocked, a garage door will be open. So I'm just kind of building on where we've been with this.
The neighbor might know the code. I mean,
it's crazy. Even outside of that, family members that have codes to stuff, we want to make sure we change all of it.
Yeah, between Alexa and people coming in your front door and your doorbell, like they know the whole thing. And that's what I was alluding to at the start about the listening and watching. All your devices, your microphones and your cameras are working in reverse, and everything's super hackable. So.
Right. Yep. We completely understand and can relate to that. And that's one of the things that, by all means, call us. That's something we are very focused on. We want to make sure we want to be a value add to you, so that when a client works with you and you bring us in, they're kind of like, oh, wow, what a tremendous experience. These guys came in, they answered a lot of questions for us. They fixed problems. They made us aware of things we didn't know were there, and it made it a seamless process. And hopefully then that just means, they're going to refer you more because, hey, you need to work with Ann or Andrea or whoever, because, they have some resources in their pocket in this day and age that are a true value to us. And that's what our goal is, that we can take, the years of experience that we have and not only create an environment that's fantastic for them to live in their new home with, audio and video and lighting, but safety and security. That's one of the real important things to look at here, because we live in a day and age when, the crazy stuff that goes on and the stories I hear every day appall me and scare me. And we are out to make sure that anything we touch or we're involved in, we try to mitigate that and make sure that they feel secure.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I mean, Steve, Alec, and everyone on here for sharing and contributing and listening and all the things, because I just think it's another place where we can add a lot of value and better educate ourselves to be of service to our clients and customers. And it sounds like, I agree, Ann, that there's a lot of work that we should be exploring here for the greater good of our community, our industry, and for our clients. So, and of course, it benefits each of us too in understanding how our systems work. So, are there any other questions before we wrap up here today?
No, I just want to say thank you very much. This was really helpful. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It can get as simple or as complex as you want, but even simple systems, I think, could use a little bit of attention, right? Because I think a lot of people, they buy these things thinking or knowing they want them to do certain things. And I think there's other ways in which we can just help advise our clients. Hey, before you dig in, you might want to assess what you want it to do before you just start buying things, to make sure they talk well together and it actually serves your needs. There may be alternative products that may serve you better than that. So I love having that resource and being able to call Steve and their team. So again, thank you all so much.
Yeah, and Ted has my contact info. I know he's going to push it out please do not hesitate to text me, call me, and ask a question. I love getting questions. Anything we can do to help you out, we're more than happy to do it. I'd rather have you call me or Alec to ask a question than go to Best Buy, because unfortunately we get the phone calls to fix all the problems when someone was steered wrong at Best Buy or Magnolia Center, and they're kind of like, well, this doesn't work now, and this is what I was sold. I'm going to be straight up front with you, and I've got a lot of other contacts in the industry. If I don't know, trust me, I can get you an answer as long as I've been doing this. So I welcome the calls.
Yep. And his number's on there. You'll see I put a link to their website there of ways to reach them. And, just remember with these clients, it's only as good as the pipe that's coming in, right? So it's like water pressure. You can't just say, well, my faucet I don't have good water pressure. Well, we have to start at the street, right, to diagnose. The same thing goes with Wi-Fi. If things aren't working, we often see there's a Wi-Fi problem first. We have to designate getting the network working consistently, making sure what we've got coming in from the supplier is great, and then how it's being dispersed through the home, which most people want to do it wirelessly, but there's limits to all of that. And so those are things that they're experts in, but I often see that as a problem that people consider. And I've noticed some clients, when they're in homes, make sure you check to see the strength of your cell signal. Some people, Belmont is notorious of being a problem with that, but just for different clients, just remind them that if that's important to them or who the provider is in those areas, it may make a difference to them that there is, Comcast or Google or other things. So cool. Well, we will continue some of the work here as well, as far as some of these checklists and opportunities. And I might be reaching out to some of you here on this call to be a part of that. I appreciate you all so much. And I wish you a great rest of the week. Happy tax day. That's not really tax day.
Hey, Steve, Alec, thank you so much. Really appreciate everything you presented here. Very helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Glad we could help.
All right, y'all. Have a great day. Enjoy its beautiful weather.
Thanks, Ted.
All right,
care.
we'll see you. Take care.
Bye-bye.